Hello, everybody. This is Tom Bronak. Today, I'd like to talk to you about how you can organize, how you can develop your systems management organization in support of your infrastructure, your systems development lifecycle, your production operations, your compliance, and your recovery. To begin with, let's talk about what business continuity is and how it has to be implemented within your company. The charter is basically a charter towards executive management, and they're charged with eliminating business interruptions, ensuring continuity of business, minimizing the financial impact of an interruption to business, and adhering to legal and regulatory requirements. Risk management has to look at your environment to determine if you have any gaps and exceptions to the regulatory requirements that you have to adhere to. They in turn recommend insurance. They also determine what legal and regulatory requirements you have to adhere to, and they cost justify the use of insurance against the regulatory requirements and also for any gaps, exceptions, or obstacles you may have against being able to continue your business. And then they determine what vendor agreements we need to have in place. Information technology is for critical jobs, the data sensitivity and the access to those jobs, the vital records management, the vaulting and data recovery prospects, the recovery time objectives and the recovery point objectives, and any kind of mainframe, mid-range, and server IT environment. Business recovery is more concerned about your locations, your business units. There's an inventory management that's required, so you know the assets in that location and how they're configured. And you have business continuity and office recovery. Office recovery can be site evacuation and movement to a business recovery facility to continue business. Now, establishing interfaces with key departments will allow for the inclusion of corporate-wide recovery procedures. Security, salvage, and restoration operations have to be put in place for any location that could suffer a disaster event that would force the people within the location to leave and go to a business recovery site. Continuity of business also involves a lot of people. The executive management, information technology, the operations of the company, not only IT operations, the business operations, the auditing department, the financial department, public relations, because if you have a disaster, you have to talk to the rest of the world, general services, which is human resources and as such, personnel, both involved on teams and other people within the company that could be affected by a disaster event or by two clients and the community, and the facilities people who have to set up the site to make sure that the facilities meet the needs for power, water, HVAC, and so on. And the supply chain vendors should also be kept informed if a disaster event occurs, because they're going to have to deliver their supplies instead of to the primary site, but to the secondary site where the recovery operation is now being assumed. The systems management organization is broken into the following areas. You have resource management, systems development lifecycle, recovery management, and support. Service or resource management has to do with service level agreements and compliance to customer contracts so that they have the equipment they need, the equipment works at the proper speed to satisfy their response time requirements. You also have asset and inventory management, so you can acquire a new asset, put it into the inventory, or you can remove or redeploy an asset and move it to a secondary location, then update the inventory and the configuration, and then finally you could terminate a piece of equipment where you would have to release it from the inventory and from the configuration. Capacity and performance management are also included in this leg because They will note the capacity of a new piece of equipment and then monitor its performance going forward. The system development lifecycle has to do with application development or maintenance, application testing, quality assurance, production acceptance, and production. Business recovery. The business continuity management is the top level that executive management has to work with. Security management has to protect the assets. Vital records management performs the functions for data processing, backup, and recovery. Network management has to do with encryption over the network and safeguarding the data transmissions. Business recovery is for locations. Disaster recovery is for IT. And risk management is for compliance. Now, support management comes into the role also because after it's in production, if there's a problem or an incident, they have to address the problem and incident. Sometimes the resolution to a problem or incident could require a change, and when you do have a change, you go back to the maintenance, acceptance testing, quality assurance, production acceptance, and so on. Asset management. Asset management starts when an asset is acquired. A purchase order is placed against it. It's installed and tested at a location, and it's added to the master inventory as well as the configuration inventory for that location. When an asset is redeployed, another work order is assigned, the asset is picked up, it's compared to the master inventory, it's put into a warehouse until a service order is asked for it, then it's brought to a site where the data is erased. In this case, the company data and any unnecessary programs are erased, and then the asset can be placed into a new location. When it's terminated, another piece of work order comes in, a service order comes in, they turn around and erase the data off of the machine in accordance to the Department of Defense standards, and they make the device ready to sell. When somebody wants to buy the piece of equipment, they can purchase it, and then they have to sign a release form, because when the equipment leaves your site, it can end up in a dump someplace, and if it does, then the EPA Superfund and stuff can get involved, and you could be charged a lot of money for the fact that somebody else discarded your old equipment. So the release form will protect you against that. Once the purchase order is completed and you receive your money, that's passed on to finance. At the end, even when a terminated device is completed, you have an archive, so you can always track what happened with the equipment. Asset management also has the life cycle that can be put into a spreadsheet, and from this spreadsheet you can calculate the costs associated with it. And there's two sections, asset management, infrastructure management. And the asset management, when they have to acquire a new piece of equipment, they place an order. But to do the order, they ask for an architect to say, how is this piece of equipment going to fit into my environment? And then the engineer will look at it and say, all right, here's the types of equipment that you might be interested in purchasing. Then you can actually go to the various vendors and evaluate the different equipment and select the ones that you want. Then it's shipped and received, and then the infrastructure team installs it. They add the entry of the new piece of equipment to the inventory, and you also add the entry to the configuration for the location for where it's installed. The costs are then added to accounting and finance, and bills are paid. For redeployment, the same thing happens. In this case, you have to clean the equipment and then go through the same cycle again. And for termination, you have to clean the equipment to the Department of Defense standards, whereas here you're only cleaning it to the company standards. And you can make it ready for sale, donate, disposal, or use at a disaster recovery site. Sometimes your disaster recovery sites may not need the same power that your production site has, and the old equipment that you would have disposed of normally may have an extended life cycle by placing it into a DR site, and instead of having to pay for extra equipment at the site, you can use your own equipment as a standby. Again, for the infrastructure, these are the people who are actually performing the tasks that are used to install and test new equipment and add it to the inventory, or redeploy it. In that case, they'll pick up the equipment, erase the equipment data to company standards. They'll hold it in a warehouse until somebody else needs it, and then they'll redeploy it to that person. And for termination, they'll erase the data to the Department of Defense standards. They'll either dispose, donate, or sell the equipment, and then they'll certify the process. And keep an archive of that so that you always can trace back to make sure your equipment had been certified and somebody actually signed off on it to take ownership of it, so you won't be blamed for any mistake going forward. The system development lifecycle actually looks like this, where an end user has a work order and he submits the work order to the development department. He says, here's the purpose of my application, here's the business data associated with it, here's the person who owns that data, this is the sensitivity of the data and how critical it is and how it can be used. And then restrictions or access controls are established. Backup and recovery procedures are also established. Now, after it leaves development, it'll go to testing, and there'll be unit and system testing performed there. Today, people are using VM sites to help with the testing. What they do is they take a copy of their production site and put it into a VM site, and then they do the testing against that VM site. That could be new developments, maintenance, and recovery. Whatever testing is done, the output of that test, if it's successful, is added to the documentation going from the development and testing area to the quality assurance area. In that case, they'll make sure all the documentation that's necessary is available and that it's all at the same version and release level. Once that's all compiled, they'll then turn it over to production acceptance, and they'll set up the production environment to receive and process the new application. Anytime a change has to be made to the new application, it'll go through a change management, then go to maintenance, and then the cycle is actually done over and over again. Data is kept in sync from the production site to a recovery site, either through backups, which is the old method, sent to a vault and then recovered, or through online backups, which is the new method, which can be virtual tape libraries or actual data mirroring so that they're in sync between the two locations, or in most cases with VM is recovery point applications are used to keep data in sync between the production site and a recovery facility. Also, when an end user submits an application, and that application is important to support business, then they may say, well, what would happen if I lost my original location? They would have to go to a business recovery facility. So their operation would evacuate this building and go to that building, transfer the staff to that building. That building would then be connected to the production site, and operations would be picked up where it was left off. Systems management and controls have to do with the workflow that's going from development through the entire systems development lifecycle, as we showed before, and this is telling you what functions are performed at each step. The actual process of creating an application would start with a work request, then a technical assessment, and a business assessment, and then a checkpoint where you make the determination if you want to buy or build the application. Then you perform whatever work has to be done, and then you perform the testing. If the testing is successful, you will then turn over to the production environment. If it's not, you'll go back and continue this loop until it is successful. The QA review is done and accepted, it's scheduled, put into production, and yet turned over. When you're going through this process, from development through testing, quality assurance, and production acceptance, you have a number of forms that are created. In a development area, you have development request form, the business need, the application overview, the audience, functions and job descriptions, business and technical review, cost justification, and so on. When you complete this cycle, you put a date over here. As you go through to each of the cycles, you finally come down to a cycle that has no completion date on it, but you want to find out what's going on. So you can loop to the documentation repository or catalog for that location and step through. Now, when the data is completed, or the report is completed, it'll turn green, 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 yellow, which means that I'm in the process of establishing the Vital Records Manager. Click on that, get the form, and actually drill down to the person performing the task. Same for everything. Also, since the work order is going to involve a lot of people and their time and perhaps additional resources, it'd be nice to have a purchase order for each of these people and each of these functions being performed so that you could tally the cost for each item of work that's being done. And at the end, you can total it and give the person a chargeback. Now, this is important because a lot of projects are similar in nature, and people don't really know how much the project's going to cost in advance. But by looking at a project that's similar to the one you're about to launch and catching an idea of what the total cost is and what steps are involved and how long it may take, then you can better understand the involved, how long it's going to be to actually get something done and how much it's going to cost you. Workflow management. Today, a lot of productivity is lost in workflow, so let's talk about how we can better it. First of all, a workflow management system should be accessible from any place at any time, so you have an internet connection. But it could be an intranet within your company, so people who are authorized can go to your company site, go to the intranet, and then look at the workflow management system. An automated personnel system could be added to it so that if you have a need for additional staffing, that can be accomplished through the automated personnel system. Also, if your staff needs to be trained because of new products or new procedures, an automated training system could be integrated with that as well. User profiles are maintained in the system, and it says, here are the applications that I'm allowed to get to. Here's my user ID and password. Here's my functional responsibilities, and here are my restrictions. That's helpful in establishing access controls. A tracking library will keep track of all workflow that was done in the past, that is currently being done, and is projected for the future. A database management system can be used for forms. It's basically a table. And you can take the forms, automate them here, and have a front end to the forms so that you can understand which form you need to get the work done and better understand how to fill it out. And data entry validation can come in and make sure you filled it out properly before it moves thereon. Flat files that are not database, such as standards, procedures, manuals, plans, or anything else that is not in a database form, can be stored in a documentation library. When you assign a piece of work to a person, you log that piece of work and you assign it to a person, and it may be assigned to many, many people from one person to the other down the line until it's completed. So a tracking system would be added to follow how that work, the item of work, is being performed. Then later, you can measure the amount of time that it took for each event and if any problems arose while the event was being performed. Then you can have analysis reports to see how the workflow performed, and then you can report that to management technical people, and they can turn around and make recommendations for improvement. A forms management system, as we spoke about, would start with an interface provided to the user to help him or her select the right form for the piece of work that's being done. It's the old story. I have something to be done, and I know I need a form to get it done, but I don't know which form. Once I find out which form is required, I don't know where to get the form. I don't know how to fill it out. I don't know how to get approval. I don't know who to give it to to get the work done. And then as the work's done, I can't get to the person who's doing the work because I've just found out there's a change to the work and I have to make him aware of it. So all of that is overcome by a forms management system. You start out with a forms library which contains all the forms as we showed earlier, and the work order would then be placed against its proper form and completed. The form would then be routed to the next person along the line, or it had to be selected, authorized, assigned, routed from the first to the last person, tracked and logged. Interactive communication has to be allowed between the originator and the person doing the work. Changes in history have to be maintained. Completion status has to be maintained. Acceptance has to be maintained. And a chargeback accounting and reporting system should be performed. Personnel are selected from a personnel matrix. These people will be assigned to do the work. There's a job title, job description, their functional responsibilities, the tools they use and how well they know it, the skill level associated with it, what their documentation needs are, what their current skill level is, what self-improvement needs they have to achieve their career path goals, and what kind of training can we provide to them to help them get their career path goal. Well, work is defined as ongoing or new. If it's new, they have to be trained. If it's ongoing, you may have to have other people trained on the type of work because the work level has grown so high, or you lost the person who was doing the work, so you have to replace them. What skills are required, what availability they have, what training and scheduling we can get them into, and how we can recruit and place people. All people should be filling out a learning skills index. That would list the skills they have and how good they are in each of the skills that they have. If a person has to be added to a project and the project requires somebody with intermediate skills and he's only a beginner, then he can be put through training to get the skills needed to become intermediate enough to satisfy the project needs. Additionally, you may have a need to be certified on a vendor product, so we can go to the vendors and schedule classes for our people and get certifications. Sometimes the vendors don't provide the education you require, but universities do. So you can get an accreditation from a university that you have an agreement with. Through all this, your people will definitely be trained up to the speed they need, and the morale of your staff will definitely be improved. Final goal in any kind of recovery organization is the Emergency Operations Center. This is like a city war room or a military war room when an event has occurred. It's manned by various desks that contain a person who is in charge of a variety of operations. For example, there are 5 command centers within a company: Contingency Command Center, Incident Command Center, Help Desk, Operations Command Center, and Network Command Center. We would have one command center manager at the desk, and he would communicate between the command centers who recognize problems and the emergency operations manager who has to respond to them. Compliance would be adhered to both domestically and internationally through the corporate certification officer, and the corporate information security manager would also be involved. Since today a lot of your facilities are threatened by terrorists or active shooters, workplace violence prevention has to be involved as well. The Emergency Operations Center has to also talk to the various lines of business within your organization. They may be at various locations containing different employees with a different infrastructure, different equipment, different systems, applications, services, suppliers, and customers. And they all have recovery time and point objectives to meet. You also talk to emergency response management, which is state and local government, first responders, heads of Department of Homeland Security, Office of Emergency Management, and of course your local community, especially if you're sharing a facility or a business park with other companies. Business continuity management has to always be involved because they're the ones who are responding to a failure, and that's risk management, disaster recovery, business continuity, crisis management, and so on down the line, including protection, salvage, and restoration. Business integration is always involved as well, but they're usually up front. Service level agreements, which we would like to know, because if a failure is affecting a service level agreement or a regulatory requirement, we would like to know about that as soon as possible. Now let's take a look at dashboards that can be used to help you. This is an executive dashboard that we've created. It has 4 subcomponents. And this is, by the way, this executive dashboard is based on enterprise resiliency and corporate certification, which is basically putting all of your recovery operations under one umbrella and in having those people all speak the same language, use the same tools, and then having certification or compliance to all the laws and regulations of countries that you do business in. The infrastructure has a separate dashboard. System development lifecycle has a dashboard. Recovery has a dashboard for physical locations and for IT operations, such as application recovery certification. And then you have a compliance dashboard. This lists all your audits, if you passed or failed, if you failed, what kind of a gap or exception you have or an obstacle, and then what corrective action or remedial action is being taken. For any kind of recovery, including evacuation plans, sometimes problems arise. When a problem arises and an action item is generated, it's passed on to Contingency Command Center, and they're in charge of all the active disaster recoveries events, either in testing or actual activities or real events. And there could be many at one time. They will take the action items, understand them, and communicate them to the Emergency Operations Center. He, in turn, communicates to executive management, and the executive management projects a single image of the company to the media, clients, employees, community, government, and the families of all those that are involved. The dashboard for infrastructure would look something like this: acquisition, redeployment, termination, and the use of the infrastructure staff for all of these functions. So as an acquisition goes through its life cycle, it can be green, 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 yellow. We order yellow. It hasn't been delivered and installed. And the inventory, of course, hasn't been upgraded, and the configuration has been upgraded because we haven't received it yet. So all of these things can be used for a quick trail through where you click on the install, find the person who's responsible for doing the install, and talk to them directly. A recovery management, now this is right now the executive management, and the dashboard is available immediately. And this is used to generate exercise books. And there are 6 phases that are involved. There's a recovery site, infrastructure readiness, there's a planning session, there's a pre-test where you're actually setting up the test, there's an application actual test where you actually use the run book and make sure the application works at the recovery site, the same as the way it did in the production site. There's a post-test, which is where you're gathering all the information, and then there's a post-mortem where you present the information to management. Now, there is an online demonstration available for anybody who wants to see how the dashboards work. And if you're interested, you can send me an email, use my address, and I'll send you back the link so that you can take a look at the demonstration online. If you have any questions, please forward them to me, and I will respond to all of your inquiries as soon as I possibly can. What's the next step? Well, if you believe that this approach can help your company improve performance and bring products and services to market more rapidly, then contact me, please. I'd definitely love to talk to you about it. And of course, my contact information is right here. I would love to assist you in integrating this approach within your own environment. And remember, this approach uses your existing data, So you do not have to change information to adopt this product. What we basically do is we provide you with quick access to the information you need from any place at any time and with drill down opportunities. All right, if there's anything else, please contact me. I'll be happy to answer your questions. In the meantime, thank you so very much for your time. I enjoyed talking to you. I hope you learned and enjoyed this presentation. Bye now.